All right. Hi, welcome everyone. My name is Cassie Russell. I am the horticulture technical specialist for Cohort Wholesale in Ontario. So myself and Cohort's technical rep in BC, Raj Gill, we are going to be co-hosting this webinar today. So we just like to welcome you to this webinar to learn about the new revolutionary insecticide from Vestaron called Spear-Lep. For those of you who are not yet familiar with Cohort, we are a master distributor of fruit and vegetable crop protection products. We work with distributors and retailers across Canada to provide technical and sales support for our portfolio of products. Cohort's really excited to be working with Vestaron to introduce this new insecticide, Spear-Lep, as well as a number of planned future products for the Canadian outdoor fruit and vegetable market. I was fortunate enough to get to see this product in action this past season. I think it's a really unique product. It's going to bring a lot of value to Canadian growers. So very excited to be working with Vestaron on this. Before I introduce our speakers, just a bit of housekeeping. If you do have questions in this platform, we do have a question section, so you can write them there. Feel free to type them throughout the presentation so we can make sure that they are answered. And then without further ado, I'd just like to introduce our guests. So we have Kira Sappington, the Director of Sales with Vestaron. So she's here just in the background today to help answer questions. And then our presenter is going to be Dr. Daniel Peck. Dr. Peck is the Director of Field Development at Vestaron Corporation and is currently based near Rochester in Western New York State. He earned his bachelor's degree in zoology and entomology from the University of Wisconsin at Madison and a doctorate in entomology from Cornell University. Dr. Peck is a board certified entomologist with the Entomological Society of America and a certified senior ecologist with the Ecological Society of America. Before joining Vestaron, Dan worked as a biological programs manager at BioWorks, and he also has prior experience as an independent consultant in the area of turfgrass entomology, as an assistant professor at Cornell in the area of soil insect ecology, and a senior research fellow at the International Center for Tropical Agriculture in Cali, Colombia. So with that, thank you, Dan, for being here today to present on Spear-Lep. You got your screen sharing all queued up, so I'll pass it all over to you.
Thank you very much, Cassie. Thank you very much, Raj, for having me here today, and thank you, audience, for your interest. We'll spend the next bit talking about how Vestaron is leading a peptide-based revolution in plant protection. We, as a company, are committed to giving growers new, novel, effective chemistries that address proven neuromuscular targets. These molecules are new IRAC groups. They're new modes of action, so they overcome existing pesticide resistance issues, and they offer a very desirable safety profile for workers, beneficials, and the environment, while also bringing the performance that you demand from your conventional insecticides. By way of introduction to Vestaron Corporation, we're about 50 employees. We were incorporated back in 2005, largely as an R&D operation. That has changed in the past 3 to 4 years with a change to take on more commercial aspirations. So instead of spinning off new active ingredients and new modes of action, we are moving into full commercialization, which is occurring in the United States, Canada, Mexico, and Europe, as well as Latin America right now. Our corporate headquarters are currently in Durham, North Carolina, and our R&D facilities have been more than a decade in Kalamazoo, Michigan, associated with Western Michigan University. Our backers are all leading ag tech and life sciences investors, including some of these big names that you see down below on your screen. Why is a revolution needed? Well, we're all very satisfied with conventional and chemical pesticides because they offer great efficacy, great performance. But we're also increasingly aware that these can have downsides, such as environmental repercussions, harms to the actions of beneficial organisms and pollinators, and they can also have safety issues for consumers and workers. And we are all also painfully aware that it's increasingly difficult to commercialize new chemical active ingredients. The last neuromuscular mode of action, for instance, emerged more than 10 years before Spear-Lep emerged on the scene as a new IRAC group in November 2018. And that's because there are increasing development costs for these products, late-stage failures, and increasing regulatory hurdles for your conventional insecticides. And we all know that it's a concern of all of us that insecticide resistance management continues to be forefront so that we can keep using these valuable commercial products as long as possible to extend their commercial lifetime and to extend their period of utility as tools in insect pest management. What we bring to the scene are peptides as plant protection products, as pesticides. And instead of talking about what is an amino acid, what is a peptide? A peptide is a short chain of amino acids. They're considered wannabe proteins. They're not long enough to actually be a protein. So they sit in between the world of the proteins and the world of the amino acids. And it just so happens that there is a rich source of bioactive peptides out there in the world that Mother Nature brings to us. And that is venoms from certain venomous animals. Our first peptide was actually based on a peptide that naturally occurs in a venomous spider that is endemic to Australia. But we have been able to harness these peptides and isolate only the part of that peptide that is active against the target pests, and essentially carve off the rest of the peptide that might have impacts on mammals or pollinators or other adverse effects that we don't want to bring to the market. We optimize that construct to maintain its three-dimensional stability, because that three-dimensional stability of the peptide is fundamentally important for its interaction with its target sites. Then we engineer this construct into a GMO yeast that secretes our peptide under liquid fermentation. We concentrate the final product media, we filter out the GMO DNA, and then we bottle it. And that gives us Spear-Lep and Spear-T that we'll be talking about today. What about the Spear peptide? This is our first introduction to the market. We have a second one that's under review by the US EPA right now, and we have a third that is under field trials in the US right now. So our first one is Spear peptide, and we've learned a lot of lessons from the development of this commercial ingredient. This one, like I said before, was derived from a naturally occurring bioactive venom constituent. It just so happens that venom happens to be a very rich resource for bioactive peptides. This is an inhibitor cysteine knot type protein, which contains 3 disulfide bridges, which keep this peptide in a three-dimensional shape, which is important with its interaction with receptor sites. It has a 40 amino acid structure, and its official active ingredient is something that should be read, not necessarily spoken. It's GS omega kappa HXTX HV1A. It weighs in at about 30 times smaller than the Cry1AC protein that you're familiar with in Bacillus thuringiensis. However, it is almost 20 times larger than some of the conventional synthetic insecticides, such as imidacloprid. And that the size of our molecule, as you will see shortly, poses a bioavailability challenge, which has been a hurdle to development of this kind of peptides for insecticides. We are not the first to try and develop and promote peptides as pesticides, but we're the first team that has brought all various answers together to overcome some of these major hurdles. There are major barriers to development, which include production hurdles. Can we produce it at scale and at reasonable cost so that we're competitive with the conventional insecticides that are out there? And we have been able to do that. We have a proprietary production platform that can accommodate not only Spear, but a number of other peptides that are in our pipeline at the moment at positive scale and cost, so that the final product is competitive with some of its competing conventional insecticides. Regulatory has been a hurdle because the development of Spear peptide has not neatly fallen into either a biological class or a chemical class. It's something more like a synthetic biological is one of the ways we like to think of it. However, it did not necessarily fall into an efficient path as established by the US EPA, where we first registered it. But the EPA came up with the emerging technology branch or sub-branch which is able to accommodate the evaluation of Spear and be able to give us a designation and move us forward as a bioinsecticide rather than as a conventional insecticide. And third is the question about bioavailability. This is a peptide. It needs to maintain its three-dimensional shape. It needs to keep that when it's being formulated in the manufacturing process and any formulation after that point. And then once it's taken up by the insect, it has to be able to handle the pH of the insect gut and the enzymes that are there. So we've been able to overcome that bioavailability challenge by producing a stable peptide, optimization for formulation, and taking advantage of a synergy with the gut disruptor to ensure uptake via ingestion. And so our peptide is ingested along with a facilitator that disrupts the gut, allowing us to move from the gut into the insect hemocoel and then into contact with target receptors in the insect's central nervous system. For Spear and also the pipeline peptides, this proprietary production platform and this process allows us to essentially reset the resistance clock. Spear attacks the nicotinic acetylcholine receptor at subunits that are next to but distinct from the neonicotinoids and the spinosins. So we are able to offer an alternative product to attack this valuable target receptor. We also have other ones in the pipeline that will be working against the sodium channel or against the diamides or against the GABA areas of the neuromuscular target sites. But these are all safe and environmentally friendly molecules. And in the end, one of our company goals is to be able to redrug 6 of the major proven insect, nerve, and muscular receptor targets. VST 7300 right here, which is another working at another distinct site on the nicotinic acetylcholine receptor, is in review by the US EPA at present. And 6700, which works against the sodium channel like your pyrethroids, this is in field trials in the United States at present. Now, what are the specific attributes of Spear in its development that are relevant to our being able to harness it as a new tool for growers? One, it has target site specificity. Unlike a lot of the biological insecticides, which work in a sort of black box about how they impact the insect, we know where we work, and we work at the nicotinic acetylcholine receptor as an allosteric modulator at site 2, close to where the neonicotinoids and the spinosins operate, but at a distinct site. Therefore, we were ordered a new Group 32 from the Insecticide Resistance Action Committee in November 2018. This is only the 14th neuromuscular IRAC group which is in existence. The last group, until recently, was in 2007, and that's when the diamides emerged as ryanodine receptor modulators back in 2007. So you can see that new neuromuscular modes of action are very few and far between. We intend to, within 5 years, we intend to be putting out maybe 2 a year of different IRAC groups, different modes of action. The second attribute is that we are classified as a bioinsecticide from the US EPA, and that will carry on to other regulatory areas as well. And with that brings along some of the benefits of being a bioinsecticide: a 0-day pre-harvest interval, a 4-hour restricted entry interval. We're exempt from residues, so we break down not into anything toxic, but we break down into amino acids, which have no limits to their residues, and we are very safe for non-targets. We are active in two modes of activity, one via contact and one via ingestion. As a contact insecticide, we can be used as a high concentration spray solution. And to get into the insect's hemocoel, we rely on diffusion through the spiracles to be able to make it into that insect. And so we largely target smaller, softer bodied insects and mites, such as two-spotted spider mite, western flower thrips, and green peach aphid through this mode of action, whiteflies as well. So this is where Spear is used at a high concentration as a contact insecticide for largely these smaller, softer bodied insects. A lot of them are greenhouse pests. But the main mode of action I'll be talking about today is the product Spear-Lep, where we have to have ingestion with BT. The gut disruption that Bacillus thuringiensis product causes is enough to allow that peptide into the body cavity of the insect after it's been ingested. We can now use it at 10 to 20 times lower concentration than as a contact toxin. And we have other benefits as well. So on the graph on the right, you can see that in the laboratory, we're able to express the synergy between dipel or BT Kostaki and Spear alone, whereas sublethal doses applied by themselves do not cause injury. Together, there is a synergy and we can achieve up to 80% control in this laboratory study. Just to mention that in a little more detail, BT is currently our workaround for that bioavailability. Remember that bioavailability issue I mentioned before? That's a major challenge. How do we get ourselves inside the insect other than as a contact toxin? So in this case, the role of the BT is simply to cause sublethal septicemia, just enough to rupture that gut and allow the spear, which functions as a neurotoxin, into the insect and into contact with receptors in the central nervous system. So compared to BT alone, Spear plus BT kills faster and impacts larger larvae better. And it also has a longer residual of protection from 7 to 14 days than BT alone at 3 to 5 days. After 3 to 5 days, the titers of BT fall down drastically because of photodegradation. But these sublethal levels are still enough to facilitate the peptide so that we get control out to 7 to 10 days and beyond. Now let's move into the commercial side. These are two pictures which depict the expected labels for Canada. Our decision is expected the 15th of December of the month that's coming up. So we're very soon know, and we are pretty confident that we know what will be on that label because of the dialogue that we've had with the PMRA in the last several months. There will be two products, Spear-T and Spear-Lep. Once again, Spear-T is a insecticide, miticide for the suppression or control of spider mites, thrips, and whiteflies on greenhouse vegetables and on spotted wing Drosophila outdoors, whereas Spear-Lep must be combined with a BT facilitator for it to be able to target Lepidopteran larvae in a range of crops. Now, the Canadian label is fairly restricted compared to the US label, as is often the case. So let me start and introduce the US label, which first appeared in August 2017 for Spear-T and in September 2018 for Spear-Lep. Let's launch into more of a discussion about Spear-Lep and then just very briefly touch on the outdoor use potential for Spear-T before we wrap up. So let's take a look at the label and then let's take a look at the performance trials to give you an example of how we have tested Spear-Lep in the field to understand its best use practices. This is a US label, and you can see, I don't expect you to read, but it's a very long list of fruits and vegetables, field crops, specialty crops, greenhouse and outdoors for which is current on the Spear-Lep label. And also a very long list, essentially any external feeding Lepidopteran that is susceptible to a BT Kostaki or a BT Aizawi, that is a Lepidopteran active BT, is on the label. So it's a very broad label. In Canada, this is the label that we are anticipating. We anticipate use in apples and pear for tortricid moths, including codling moth, oblique-banded leaf roller, oriental fruit moth, and tufted apple bud moth. In peach, we expect approval for oriental fruit moth. And in brassicas, we expect approval for cabbage looper, diamondback moth, and imported cabbage worm. Celery and tomato will be on the label with beet armyworm and cabbage worm, and beet armyworm also in lettuce and spinach, and in cranberry, just green spanworm. This is an example of why the label is pretty limited. Green spanworm is on the label for cranberry, although we were able to submit data for black-headed fireworm, cranberry fruitworm, and other worms in cranberry. It just so happens that green spanworm, as far as we were able to tell, is the only one that's actually listed on the BT product. And PMRA obliged us to only be able to put things on the Spear product if it was also equally on a BT product. So right now, until the BT products change in Canada, it will be a while before we're able to add other worm species in cranberry, for instance. So we will have to continue to work hand in hand with the BT industry to try and get their labels expanded to accommodate Spear-Lep. The use rates are 1.2 to 2.3 liters per hectare. When growers start out, we always recommend using the high label rate of 2.3 liters per hectare until they see the performance, get comfortable moving forward with it. And then at that point, they can scale it back to better cost and use and lower it down to the 1.2 liter per hectare rate if they're able to find efficacy at that rate. But keep in mind now that it must always be applied with a separate product, and that is the low labeled rate of a BT or BTA product. There's a limit of 3 consecutive applications and 6 applications per calendar year. Minimum spray volumes for field crops and orchard crops. Recommended use with a surfactant, but not required. Unlike the US label, there is no chemigation or application through irrigation systems, and there is no aerial application through aerial sprays like there is on the US label. And here's an example of a combination product. This is BioProtect Plus. This is a BT Kerstaki, a Lepidopteran active BT product. And when the label says use Spear with the low labeled rate of a BT active product, if you are going after cabbage looper and your BT of choice is BioProtect Plus, you would combine 1.2 to 2.3 liters per hectare of Spear-Lep with 0.9 liters per hectare of BioProtect Plus when you're going against cabbage looper, and that would be the same for imported cabbage worm and diamondback moth, which are here on the examples. So I just want to I'll be glad to elaborate on this at the end or now, but it's important to note that we do require the additional application of BT as a facilitator. Now let's move into 5 or 6 examples of performance trials where we put the product through its paces. Most of these trials are in the United States or in bordering states or elsewhere, which are part of the package that we submitted to PMRA for their regulatory approval. Here, for instance, is an example of a study that was conducted against codling moth and apple. And early on, this was back in 2019, early on, we tried it just as a season-long standalone. So this is the untreated check, and this is tunneling damage from codling moth. This is the untreated check, almost 30% of fruit, 30 out of 50 fruit had tunneling damage. And this is the benefit of using Spear-Lep, but this is 7 applications with 1-week intervals, which is something that a grower would never use. Would definitely be put into a rotation program. But early on, we thought it important to emphasize that we had insecticidal activity as a strange new technology, and we held our own against Proclaim, Emmelin, chlorantraniliprole, and spineteram. You'll know those as Proclaim Opti, Alticor, Delegate for instance. So just use as 7 applications with 1-week intervals. We performed as well as the conventional standards for suppressing damage from codling moth. That's one example. Later on in apple, we would rotate us into the a rotational program. Here, for instance, now the red patterned fill is us in every other application as part of a conventional program. So this is a pure conventional program. If you take out every other application and replace it with Spear-Lep, you were able to achieve the same levels of control as measured in this study, where we looked at the % fruit damage from internal leps, such as codling moth, oriental fruit moth, and lesser appleworm, and also against the external leps, as you see here with oblique banded leaf roller and red banded leaf roller. Those are a couple examples from apple. Here's an example for diamondback moth in cabbage. This was conducted this season in Quitman, Georgia. As an example, you have the untreated control again. You have the untreated control, and these are after a rating after the first application, a rating after the second, and a rating after the third of 3 consecutive applications at 7-day intervals. And here we see Spear plus BTK, and here we see BTK alone. This difference gives you an indication of the performance difference by having improvement over BTK by itself, and this is in comparison to the conventional program. Here's another example in cabbage, and I should bring this one to your attention because in this study we evaluated the difference between using Spear with a BTK versus using Spear with a BTA. And this indicates that there's no significant difference between these bars, indicating that it doesn't matter which subspecies of BT you combine Spear with. It doesn't matter which manufacturer or which source. Spear is pretty refractory to the type and origin of the BT that's used. And it's not a very tight relationship. We just need a sublethal dose of BT to be ingested along with Spear so that the gut is disrupted in the sublethal fashion, allowing the Spear to get through and diffuse into the hemosphere and then into the central nervous system. This is an example from celery will be on the label with beet armyworm. Here you see an example from that was conducted in California. The low label rate of Spear-Lep plus BTK, the high label rate of Spear-Lep plus BTK, and this is compared to sulfoxaflor or Sequoia, S-fenvalerate, Asana, and then a mixed conventional rotation. And these were the result of 6 applications at 6 to 14-day intervals. Again, this isn't representative of a grower program, but the fact that Spear plus BTK can hold its own against these as 6 consecutive applications is a real indicator that once it's put into that program as a rotation product, we will have the same level of success. And growers can choose it for a lot of different reasons. They can choose it to rotate it into that 6 application program at a window of time when they want to protect their natural enemies. They could use it at the end of harvest, so they don't have to worry about the maximum residue limits because Spear has none. Or they could use it in the middle of the program simply to get a new IRAC group, a new mode of action as a way to manage insecticide or pesticide resistance. Here's an example from tomato, also with beet armyworm. Lower levels of control, but the fact is that the low and the high rate of Spear also performed as well as the industry standard, in this case, Intrepid. Again, these are 6 applications with 1-week intervals. Then I'll finish up with 2 examples from cranberry. We spectacular cranberry data from Wisconsin. So it's too bad we weren't able to get more of these cranberry pests on the label in Canada, but that will be something going forward. This is an example with Sparganosus fruitworm and cranberry fruitworm from Wisconsin. This is a program with 3 applications at 7-day intervals. This is the conventional standard, which in this case would be Altacor or chlorantraniliprole. This is BTK by itself, and this is the low and high label rate of Spear-Lep, this time just mixed with an even lower rate, a 1/2 pint rate of Lep Protect. So this is an even lower rate than the ones that I've been showing you before. So some of these pests you can go even lower with the amount of BTK that's used. And also our product was put through the paces along with a long list of other conventional and alternative products here, and it stacks up really well. These are data for management of black-headed fireworm larvae. This is the percent control. After 10 days, after a single application, there was 86% control with the use of Spear-Lep, which stacks up very favorably with all these other chemistries. So for among any other reason, performance is as good as the synthetics, but also the idea that there's a new mode of action, a product in here which is not impacting pollinators or natural enemies, and a product in here which has no residue tolerances is one of the reasons why a grower might want to start using and continue to use Spear-Lep. So finally, let me finish up and wrap up by sharing one more example. I didn't realize I was here already. This is sweet corn, one that we hope to get on the label soon in Canada. Is not on the label now, but you see similar results here. Problem with sweet corn is that European corn borer is on BT labels, but corn earworm is not on BT labels in Canada. So we're not able to bring this into Canada for protection against corn earworm. So this again is another example of where we would like to work with Canadian cooperators or other commercial industries to try and get this on the corn earworm BT labels in Canada, as well as with fall armyworm. In the same case with tobacco hornworm, I know there is some tobacco growing regions in Ontario and elsewhere in Canada. Tobacco hornworm is a good target and is a good target for Spear-Lep, but also this is something that we hope to get onto the label, probably in conjunction with some cooperative work with a group such as the Canadian Tobacco Research Foundation next season. And I'll finish up by saying just a little about Spear Tea. Spear Tea in Canada largely has greenhouse uses, but in the United States, it has both greenhouse uses with dipping and immersion treatments, and it also has a long list of field uses in the United States. But in Canada, the label is really pretty limited right now. Two-spotted spider mite, thrips, and whiteflies are labeled for vegetables grown in greenhouses. Spotted wing Drosophila is labeled for outdoor uses for blueberry, cherry, and caneberries. On cannabis, we have two-spotted spider mites, and on herbaceous ornamentals grown in greenhouses or high tunnels, we have two-spotted spider mite again, thrips, and whiteflies. The rates for Spear Tea, you'll notice, are very different. This is 2 to 3 liters per 100 liters, or a 2 to 3% product solution. Again, a very high concentration. Outdoor, the rates against spotted wing Drosophila are 9.4 to 28 liters per hectare. It's recommended use with a surfactant. Unlike the US label, we don't have ultra low volume or fogging language on the Canadian label yet, and there's no dipping or immersion treatments on the Canadian label yet, but those are things that we intend to pursue going forward. So I'll just show you a quick, a couple examples of success in spotted wing Drosophila from the United States. Here's an example where Spear Tea is compared to a organic rotation program and a conventional program through 4 applications at 1-week intervals, where it holds its own 69% control of spotted wing Drosophila. And also we moved on then to look at its use in a rotation program, in this case along with Zeta cypermethrin or Mustang Max. This is a rotation of Spear-Lep every other application for 6 application window of time at the low label rate, medium label rate, and higher label rates, showing the rate response and showing that this combination is as good or better than Entrust alternated with Mustang Max. So good performance against spotted wing Drosophila as well. So again, part of the limitations on the Canadian label is not because we don't have data. This is an example of recent field performance data that we've gotten from the United States, and we also have data from Europe and Mexico now that we have to share and base decisions on in developing best management practices. But part of the limitation of the Canadian label is having research that was conducted close enough to Canada to count. 2, it's working more with Canadian partners to start evaluating it in country like we intend to do this year. And 3, it's because of limitations in the BT labels that don't support the broad list of crops that are on the label in the United States. So once again, I'll bring you back to this to say that this is Spear. We are now more than a one-hit wonder, I guess you could say, because 7300 is currently under review in Mexico and the United States. 6700 is in field trials in Mexico and the United States, and we will have more insecticidal peptides coming your way as this technology unfolds. So I will leave you with this one final slide, which just summarizes the versatility of Spear, or sometimes I like to think about it, why a grower might want to start using and then continue using Spear-Lep. One is for its safety profile. It's biologically based with all the benefits associated with that. Worker, vertebrate, pollinator, and residue safety, compatibility with biological control agents and no harmful residues, very low risk of plant phytotoxicity. Secondly, it's a new IRAC Group 32, which helps in insecticide resistance management. It can be incorporated into rotations with other active ingredients to help prevent or slow the development of insecticide resistance. And if you have immersion or dipping treatments in greenhouse situations and you don't know what's coming in, it would be a good product to choose for, because whatever's coming in will not have any cross resistance with it. And finally, of course, I know it's dear to everyone's heart, is performance. But we've got broad spectrum control of most all major LEP pests and 4 major greenhouse pests, with efficacy that's equivalent to conventional pesticides, just a 0-day PHI and a 4-hour REI for flexibility and versatility for growers. We are MRL exempt for residue management. And just like most of the conventional insecticides, we can be stored at room temperature and don't have any special storage restrictions. And so with that, I really appreciate your attention, and I'll turn it over to Raj and Cassie if there are some follow-up questions that you may have that we could address.
Hi everyone, so we just got a question in at the chat box. So this question for Dan is, does Spear-T and Spear-Lep have a shelf life?
Spear-T, that's a good question. Thank you for that. Spear-T and Spear-Lep do not have a shelf life. They achieve the minimum 2 years shelf life. So it isn't necessary to use a use by late on the label. So they're just like a conventional insecticide with that respect. Thanks for that question.
Are there any more questions?
I think I see a few more there, Raj.
There are some more questions there, Cassie. Can you see them?
Yep.
Okay.
I can ask the next one. So just a little bit confusion about what's registered. Can you please confirm what is registered now for use in Canada? If you want, I can take that, Dan, if you want. Nothing is registered now, but yeah, you can go ahead.
Yeah, nothing is registered now. We expect a decision on registration acceptance in about a month before the end of the year. So stay tuned, and Cohort Wholesale will keep us all abreast of that.
So the next question is cost per acre. And so I can answer this one. So it will be with the BT and the Spear-Lep combination, it will be competitively priced with products like Delicate and Alticore.
Yeah, Raj, and that includes the BT as well, right?
Yeah.
All right, we have another question here. Can we use higher volumes of water? Could pH of the water affect its activity?
You know, as a molecule, these peptides are pretty good across a range of pHs. But as you get up above 7.5 or down below 3, then things might start to unravel, in the sense that we need to protect that stability of the molecule. So just like most of your other applications, you're going to buffer the water and keep it in between a range of, you know, 5 to 7 would be ideal, but it can go farther outside of that. Now, water volume, I think the fundamental response about water volume is to get complete coverage. It against the Spear-Lep targets, Ingestion is required, and so we need to cover that leaf surface so the insect has as much contact with it as possible. So please use the water volume, which matches those minimums, but your maximum should be so that it's not so much that it just runs off the plant, but so that we get as complete coverage as possible. That coverage is really key.
So we have another question that says, can you please confirm what is registered for now for use in Canada?
Yeah, I think that goes back to the prior question where I wasn't clear. Nothing is currently registered for use in Canada. In a month, we will expect to get regulatory approval.
And so we have another question that says, can we get a copy of the presentation? So the webinar is recorded and we can send it out to attendees.
All right, another question here. Any interest in labeling for grapes against grape berry moth? BT products are already registered against grape berry moth in Canada.
Grape berry moth has so far proven to be a challenging target. It's hard to do studies against it because it's hard to find reliable populations. That may be something we might address by conducting studies in Ontario or elsewhere in Canada where we might have a partner who could find more reliable grape berry moth populations. So we do know that there is activity against grape berry moth. We don't have enough practice, and it is on the US label, but we don't have enough data to satisfy Canadian regulatory yet. So that it's on the BT label is a good sign. Now we need to conduct enough studies to just confirm its best use practices and get it on the label. So I'd be welcome for any follow-up if you know of contract research organizations or cooperators who could help us conduct that work in Canada.
So our next question is, can these products be used in organic production?
Oh, that's a fundamental question. I'm glad you asked that because I should have addressed it. We are a bio-insecticide, but we are not organically certified. We probably never will be. And the small caveat there is we have everything going for us, but we use a genetically modified yeast in the manufacturing process. That modified yeast is what produces and secretes the peptide. Because of that existence in the manufacturing process, we are not considered organic certifiable.
All right, we have a question here. What knockdown effect was seen in trials?
What knockdown effect was seen in trials? We will see a little faster response than BT alone. That is, we will see a response in 1 to 3 days. Not a knockdown like a pyrethroid might show you. The insect has to ingest. You have to have some changes in the gut permeability by the BT, and then it has to get in. So it is not a fast knockdown like you might be thinking about with some conventional insecticides.
So our next question is, are you maintaining a spider colony to harvest peptides?
Yeah, well, yeah, milking spiders didn't prove very profitable. No, we certainly are not, and the spider is very much in the distant past. We find candidates to develop as peptides from the literature, and a lot of the material that's developed in the literature happen to be from venom of different venomous organisms, which have been studied and described as having biological activity. We are able to go in there and study those potential candidates and find the best ones, and then ultimately engineer it and develop the construct that works as an insecticide. So we go through a lot of potential candidates, but we certainly do not maintain a colony of any venomous animals.
We have a few questions here about cyclamen mite. So one of them is, will Spear-T be considered for cyclamen mite on future labels, thinking for strawberries?
You know, it will be. I'm convinced that we will have performance against all plant feeding mites, all foliar feeding mites. We do not yet have studies for, as far as I know, We may have a study indicating activity against cyclamen mite, but as far as I know, we do not have good data studies addressing cyclamen mite. So again, this is something if someone could follow up and share with me potential cooperators in Canada where we might be able to conduct such studies, that would be of interest to us.
So we have another question that asks, is Spear-Lep also MRL exempt in Canada, similar to the US?
Yes, it will be MRL exempt in Canada as well as the US.
And I think there's a follow-up about for the EU and Asia as well.
Yeah, I'm not our regulatory guy, but I believe the harmonization process in international shipping means that these MRLs are pretty harmonized across different nations. So as far as Mexico and South America, we anticipate having the same MRL exemption as well as in Europe. Oh, but if as far as shipping to Asia from the United States, yes, we meet MRL exemptions for external export.
There's one here, a question, would it work on plum curculio? Sorry if this is already covered. Yeah, any efficacy on plum curculio?
And plum curculio, no, that wasn't covered. We have, I've talked about plum curculio in the past because we believe that we know there is some suppression of plum curculio with its use, but the trouble is it's not obvious how we're impacting plum curculio, okay? Because we're not using it. This is mostly in apple studies. We have seen suppression of plum curculio in a variety of studies to know that there is some there. But how does it work against plum curculio? If we had direct impacts as a contact toxin against plum curculio, that would be unusual because the rates that we use as Spear-Lep are so low compared to the rates of Spear-T. It could be that we are protecting against natural enemy populations such that the natural enemies are free to impact plum curculio populations, or it could be that there is some direct impacts. We know in some insects you don't necessarily need a facilitator. They can orally feed on it and get impacted. But our broad understanding with beetles is that they also need a BTT or some kind of facilitator to really impact plum curculio. So right now the jury is out. I would say to a grower that you might get some if you apply at petal fall or at a time early in the apple season to control plum curculio. One benefit is that you might get some suppression of plum curculio, but it's not on the label, and I don't foresee that will be on the label anytime soon.
So our next question is, can you share what is currently preventing a chemigation label? Does the PMRA require chemigation specific efficacy data?
My understanding is that they do, but that came from our regulatory team, so I don't know what the limitation might be there. So I'm sorry, I'm not able to fully answer that. I believe they require a chemigation label or chemigation language or chemigation proof of efficacy through chemigation.
So we have quite a few number of questions still. Thank you for all the questions coming in. We'll get through as many as we can. Do you have any plans to push registration for these products being used for cosmetic applications like other biopesticides, so use in residential zones for lep pests?
We do have that as one of our business development projects to consider a homeowner use type of product, but that's in the early stages right now. There's nothing will be available in the next few years.
So our next question is, do you have a preferred BT product / supplier that we, cranberry industry, should look to work with for registering our pests?
That's what I think we've been able to show in the last 2 years of research and stuff, that we don't have a preferred manufacturer. We do a lot of our work with Leprotect because which is BioProtect. Leprotect is our privately branded bioprotect. So we do a lot of work with that, well, Lep Protect. We also do a lot of work with dipel because it's so widely used. But our understanding of it is that if you are used to using dipel as a standalone BTK application, you are welcome to continue using dipel. There's no reason to compel you to go to another product. And the same is if you have resistance to BTK, at least in some places in the United States, there are some resistance. You can switch over and use BT Izawi as an alternative for some of your brassica pest controls. So no, we at this point believe that there is not enough variation across manufacturers and sources of the BTs that we would advise you against just using what you are most comfortable with.
All right, another question here. Is there any efficacy on climbing cutworms in vineyards in the US? Unfortunately, BT is not registered for cutworms on grapes in Canada.
We have not tested against climbing cutworms. I expect that there is. If those cutworms come up and feed on foliage, they climb. I'm not familiar with the insect. They climb and feed above ground, and that foliage is treated, that I imagine we will have efficacy against that species as well. But we have not done the specific tests for that.
I think there's a few more here. What do you think about tank mixing with nutrients or other tank mixes?
Just like you are able to tank mix other conventional insecticides with nutrients or foliar feed that way, we have the same flexibility. We have the same versatility that conventionals have as far as that goes. Just keep in mind the water buffering and pH conditions, but all that's relevant for any type of tank mixing.
I guess this one's just a comment. So Justin Brankema, AAFC Vineland, has done cyclamen mite trials.
Oh, beautiful. Let's someone write that down for me.
Yeah, we can put you in touch, Dan. We can, and then also Perennia with in Nova Scotia has also done some cyclamen mite work. So we can
beautiful. Thank you for
get you that contact.
Patience.
I think there was another question here. Oh yes, so can you discuss how this insecticide impacts beneficial control insects used in greenhouse production? So an example of the effects it might have on aureus against thrips or beneficial mites or predatory wasps.
Yeah, that's a good question. I will state right off the bat that we are planning to work with BCA companies to get a strict, explicit evaluation of our impacts on those natural enemies. Work done in aureus did not show suppression. Work done for regulatory reasons do not show suppression. But given that they're smaller and softer bodied, predatory mites might be impacted to some degree. I believe though that this would be something like a horticultural oil in the sense that once it is applied and once it is dried, you can feel free to release your BCAs again because the dried material won't have any impact on the insect. So it would probably have some impact, less than 25%, but it would be temporary.
So our next question is, Spear-T, will it be considered for cyclamen mite control on future labels? Thinking strawberries.
Yeah, we attended to that, Raj. Yeah, we will look into cyclamen mite going forward, especially as a strawberry pest.
Okay, I think we're at the last question here. Any activity on mealybugs or scales?
On mealybugs, no. No, we can play around with it in the lab and get efficacy against mealybugs, but then we have to figure out about the bioavailability issue. So it may be that you could feed us to a mealybug along with the BT tenebrionis, a coleopteran active BT, and have some impact. But no, there's nothing there yet. And Mealybugs. Only 1 or 2 studies have been conducted on mealybugs, and they do show some level of activity, but we have not done expanded projects to take a look at real use against that pest.
Excellent. I think, Raj, I don't know, do you see any more questions? I think there's a few that were doubled, and I think Dan answered those, but maybe just another little call if there are any additional or follow-up questions, people can put those in the question section.
Or if anything hasn't been answered yet.
It's a great amount of questions. That's awesome.
I think this might be the last question that we got. So will Spear-Lep be co-packaged with the BTK in it?
We did that for a commercial year in the United States, and we've discontinued doing that. The trouble with the co-pack is the grower does not have the flexibility to decide how much they want to use of either product. It was convenient when we were recommending 2 pints of this with 2 pints of Spear with 2 pints of Lep Protect. But if a grower wanted to use 2 pints and 1 pint, they lost that versatility. So no, it will not be co-packaged in Canada.
We have a couple more questions come in, and apologies, one I think I missed. So one of them is, are there any temperature parameters for application?
No, there are no temperature parameters for application. Nope.
There's another one here. Best timing for coddling moths and apple clearing moth on palm fruit.
Best timing. We've done studies where we can be used against the first generation and help be part of a rotation for controlling coddling moth. I'm unfamiliar with the clearing moth, but also against the second generation of coddling moth. So either generation is equally susceptible to using Spear-Lep. So you're welcome to use 2 consecutive applications in the first generation, and then leave the second generation, or attack the second generation.
And then there's just a few more questions just on efficacy on thrips, peach borers. So if anyone did miss some earlier slides in the presentation, Dan said we can share some of that information out, which will answer some of those questions as well.
Okay.
Perfect. All righty.
So it seems like we've answered all the questions. Cassie?
Yeah, I think we're good.
Okay. So I'll just wrap up the webinar. So thank you very much to everyone for attending this webinar. Special thanks to Dr. Daniel Peck for sharing his Spear-Lep knowledge and expertise. All of us at Cohort Wholesale are excited about Spear-Lep as a new tool for Canadian growers. It has efficacy of a synthetic insecticide with the versatility of a bioinsecticide. In 2022, Cohort will be working with attendees as well as growers to establish an extensive program of commercial scale demonstrations. For more information, please contact your local Cohort technical sales specialist. Our contact info is on the last slide. And so now the webinar is now adjourned. Have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.